At a luxurious event, everyone was waiting for the renowned businessman. However, when his representative took the stage, the audience could barely contain their shock. No one imagined that a simple assistant could challenge such a powerful elite. But what happened next left everyone speechless. Before you hear this amazing story, don't forget to like and share. St. Luke's Hospital was filled with a tense atmosphere that autumn afternoon. In room 305, businessman Richard Morgan, 68, looked firmly at his ex-wife Eleanor and his son Philip, who were vehemently contesting his decision. The soft light, entering through the windows, contrasted with the heavy air inside the room. "Dad, you can't be serious," exclaimed Philip, running his hands through his dark hair in a gesture of frustration. "How can you want a simple assistant to represent the company at the most important award ceremony of the year?" Richard, though weakened by the illness that had kept him hospitalized for weeks, remained unyielding. His voice, although weak, carried an unshakable determination. "My decision is made, Philip. Sarah will be the representative of Morgan Enterprises." At the Business Excellence Award ceremony, Eleanor, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. Her green eyes shone with indignation. "Richard, think carefully. This woman is just an employee. She doesn't have the status or experience necessary for an event of this caliber." The businessman took a deep breath, feeling a twinge of pain in his chest. He adjusted himself in the hospital bed before responding. "Sarah has been by my side in the company's most difficult moments. She knows every detail of our work, every challenge we've overcome. There is no one more qualified to represent everything we've built." Philip let out a sarcastic laugh. "Qualified? Dad, she's a glorified secretary. What will our partners say when they see we've sent someone so insignificant to receive an award of this caliber?" Philip's words seemed to hang in the air, laden with prejudice and contempt. Richard felt the blood boil in his veins. With a visible effort, he raised himself a little more in bed, facing his son. "Insignificant? Sarah is the reason we still have a company to represent. While you were busy spending family money on parties and luxury cars, she was working tirelessly to keep everything running." Eleanor intervened, her voice now softer, trying a different approach. "Richard, dear, we understand that you value her work, but think about the company's image. Philip or I could—" "Enough," interrupted Richard, his voice echoing around the room. "You both lost the right to represent Morgan Enterprises a long time ago. Sarah will go to the ceremony, and this is my final decision." The silence that followed was broken only by the constant beep of the heart monitors. Philip, his face red with anger, turned abruptly and left the room, slamming the door behind him. Eleanor remained, her eyes fixed on Richard. "You'll regret this, Richard," she said, her voice carrying a veiled threat. "That woman doesn't know what she's getting into." With those words, she also left the room, leaving Richard alone with his thoughts and the weight of his decision. Outside in the hospital corridor, Sarah anxiously waited. She had arrived recently, bringing some documents that Richard had requested. Dressed simply, with a navy blue pencil skirt and a white blouse, she felt out of place amid the luxury flaunted by Eleanor and Philip. When she saw her boss's ex-wife and son leave the room hastily, Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. The expression on their faces did not bode well. Hesitantly, she approached the door, knocking softly. "Come in," Richard's voice sounded from within. Sarah entered the room, her eyes immediately seeking her boss's face. "Mr. Morgan, I brought the documents you asked for. Is everything okay? I saw your family leaving and they seemed upset." Richard let out a tired sigh, but a small smile appeared on his lips upon seeing Sarah. "Ah, Sarah, I'm glad you're here. Please sit down. We have a lot to talk about." Intrigued and a little apprehensive, Sarah sat in the chair next to the bed. Richard observed her for a moment, as if making a final decision. "Sarah, you've been more than an assistant to me these past few years. You're the person I trust most in the company, perhaps even more than my own family." Sarah felt her face flush with the unexpected compliment. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. I always try to do my best. And that's why," continued Richard, "I've made an important decision. I want you to represent Morgan Enterprises at the Business Excellence Awards ceremony." The shock was evident on Sarah's face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Richard continued. I know it might seem like a surprise, but there's no one more qualified than you for this task. You know every detail of our operation, every challenge we've faced and overcome. Sarah finally found her voice. But Mr. Morgan, I'm just an assistant. I don't have experience with this type of event. Maybe Mr. Philip or Mrs. Eleanor? Richard shook his head, interrupting her. No, Sarah. It has to be you. I trust you to represent not just the company, but everything we've built together over these years. Sarah's mind was spinning. She thought about her simple life, her 7-year-old daughter Sophie, who was waiting for her at home. She thought about the sleepless nights working on reports, the countless times she had to cancel plans with her daughter to meet the demands of the company, and now this. Mr. Morgan, I don't know if I'm up to this responsibility, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Richard extended his hand, holding Sarah's with surprising strength for someone in his condition. You are, Sarah. You're more capable than you imagine. This is your chance to show everyone your worth, to prove that success doesn't depend only on family names or full bank accounts. Sarah felt the weight of those words. It was a unique opportunity, but also an immense challenge. She thought of Sophie, of how she could inspire her daughter to dream big, to believe that it was possible to achieve the impossible. I accept, Mr. Morgan, she finally said, her voice gaining confidence. I'll do my best to represent the company and everything you've built. Richard's face lit up with a genuine smile. I know you will, Sarah. I have complete confidence in you. In that moment, as the afternoon sun cast its last rays through the hospital window, Sarah felt she was on the verge of something big, something that would change her life forever. She didn't know about the challenges that awaited her, the intrigues and obstacles she would have to face, but at that instant, all that mattered was the trust her boss placed in her and the growing determination in her heart not to disappoint him. Outside the hospital, Eleanor and Philip got into their luxury car, their faces contorted with anger and frustration. This won't stand, muttered Eleanor, her eyes fixed on the hospital building. That little nobody doesn't know who she's messing with. Philip nodded, a dangerous gleam in his eyes. Don't worry, Mum. We'll show her exactly what her place is. The car departed, carrying with it the seeds of a conflict that was just beginning. Meanwhile, in room 305, Sarah and Richard continued their conversation, unaware of the storm forming on the horizon. The decision was made, and there was no turning back. Sarah would be the representative of Morgan Enterprises at the most important ceremony of the business year. What she didn't know was that this opportunity would come accompanied by challenges, revelations, and changes that would test not only her professional competence, but also her strength of character and her ability to overcome adversity. The story of Sarah, an ordinary woman about to be launched into a world of luxury, power, and intrigue, was just beginning, and with it, a journey of self-discovery, courage, and redemption that no one could predict. Sarah arrived home that night with her head spinning, the small apartment in the New York suburbs, normally a haven of tranquility after long days of work, seemed strangely small and suffocating. She found her cousin, Tanya, sitting on the living room sofa watching cartoons with Sophie. "Mommy!" Sophie shouted, running to hug Sarah. "You're late today." Sarah hugged her daughter tightly, smelling the children's shampoo in her hair. "I'm sorry, sweetie. Mommy had a different day at work." Tanya, noticing the troubled expression on her cousin's face, got up from the sofa. "Sophie, why don't you go take a bath while I talk with your mom for a bit?" The girl made a face but obeyed, leaving the two women alone in the living room. "What happened, Sarah?" Tanya asked, concerned. "You're pale." Sarah collapsed on the sofa, letting out a long sigh. "Tanya, you won't believe what happened today." In the minutes that followed, Sarah recounted the surprising conversation with Richard Morgan, the shocking decision to make her represent the company at the awards, and the hostile reaction from Eleanor and Philip. Tanya listened to everything attentively, her eyes widening more and more. When Sarah finished, she let out a low whistle. Wow, Sarah, that's amazing, but also scary, isn't it? Sarah nodded, running her hands over her tired face. I don't know if I can do this, Tanya. I mean, I'm just an assistant. What do I know? About gala awards and speeches to powerful business people? Tanya sat down next to her cousin, holding her hands. Sarah, listen, you're not just an assistant. You're the person who kept that company running while Mr. Morgan was sick. You know every detail, every contract, every challenge you've faced. If there's anyone who can represent Morgan Enterprises, it's you. But what if I make a fool of myself? What if I embarrass Mr. Morgan? Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. You won't, Tanya replied firmly. Look, I know it's scary, but think of this as an incredible opportunity. How many assistants get the chance to represent a company of this size at such an important event? Sarah bit her lip, thoughtful. I know, it's just that it's such a different world from mine, Tanya. You've seen how Mr. Morgan's ex-wife and son look at me, like I'm less than them. Tanya snorted, rolling her eyes. So what? They may have money and status, but they clearly don't have the character and competence that Mr. Morgan sees in you. Don't let them intimidate you, Sarah. Tanya's words seemed to awaken something in Sarah. She straightened up on the sofa, a determined gleam appearing in her eyes. You're right, I can't let them intimidate me. Mr. Morgan trusted me for a reason. Exactly, Tanya exclaimed, enthusiastic. Now, what you need is to prepare. Let's make a list of everything you need for this event. The two spent the next hour planning. Sarah would need an appropriate dress for the gala, shoes, accessories. She would have to practice her speech, learn the proper etiquette for an event of this caliber. And what do I do with Sophie? Sarah asked, looking toward her daughter's room. The awards are at night. I can't leave her alone. I'll take care of her, Tanya promptly offered. You know she loves staying with me. We'll have a movie and pizza night. Sarah smiled, grateful. What would I do without you, Tanya? Probably stay home watching reruns of old soap operas, Tanya joked, making Sarah laugh for the first time that night. The sound of laughter attracted Sophie back to the living room. What are you laughing about? Sarah pulled her daughter onto her lap, hugging her affectionately. We're laughing because Mommy is going to have a very special adventure at work, and Aunt Tanya is helping me prepare. Sophie's eyes sparkled with curiosity. What kind of adventure, Mommy? Sarah hesitated for a moment, thinking about how to explain the situation to a 7-year-old. Well, Mommy is going to represent Mr. Morgan's company at a very important party. It's like I'm a princess representing her kingdom at a royal ball. Sophie let out a squeal of excitement. You'll be a princess, Mommy? Will you wear a pretty dress and a crown? Sarah and Tanya exchanged amused glances. Well, not exactly a crown, sweetie, Sarah replied, laughing. But yes, I'll wear a pretty dress. Can I help choose? Sophie asked, jumping with excitement. Of course, you can, Sarah replied, feeling her heart warm with her daughter's enthusiasm. In fact, I think I'll need help from both of you to prepare for this big day. As the three talked animatedly about dresses and shoes, Sarah felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement grow within her. She knew the challenges ahead would be immense, but with the support of her family perhaps, just perhaps, she could face them. The next day, Sarah arrived at the office earlier than usual. She wanted to organize everything before the news of her appointment as the company's representative spread. Upon entering her office, however, she was surprised by Philip, who was waiting for her with a somber expression. Good morning, Philip, she said, trying to maintain her composure. Can I help you with something? Philip rose slowly, his eyes fixed on Sarah. You really think you can do this, don't you? Represent our company, take the place that is mine by right. Sarah took a deep breath, remembering Tanya's encouraging words. I'm not taking anyone's place, Philip. I'm just following Mr. Morgan's orders. Philip stepped forward, invading Sarah's personal space. Listen carefully, you opportunist. I don't know what kind of game you're playing with my father, but it ends here. You're going to call him and say you can't accept this task. Sarah's heart was beating fast, but she refused to back down. I'm sorry, Philip, but I can't do that. Mr. Morgan trusts me to represent the company, and that's exactly what I intend to do. Philip's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You don't know what you're getting into, Sarah. This isn't your world. You'll regret not listening to me." With those words, he left the office, leaving Sarah trembling but determined. She knew she had just made a powerful enemy, but she also knew she couldn't back down. The challenge was set, and she would have to prove her worth not only to Richard Morgan but to all those who doubted her. Meanwhile, in a luxurious penthouse in the Upper East Side, Eleanor was having breakfast when she received a call from Philip. "And then?" she asked without preamble. "She's not going to give up, Mom," Philip replied, frustration evident in his voice. "I think we're going to have to take more drastic measures." Eleanor smiled, a plan already forming in her mind. "Don't worry, darling. Your mother knows exactly how to deal with people like her. Leave it to me." She hung up the phone, her eyes gleaming with cold determination. Sarah might have won this small battle, but Eleanor was prepared for war, and she had resources and connections that the simple assistant couldn't even imagine. The stage was set for a confrontation that would go beyond a simple dispute for a prestigious position. It was a battle between two worlds, two visions of success and merit. And at the center of it all was Sarah, an ordinary woman about to discover strengths she didn't even know she possessed. The week to follow would be crucial. Between preparations for the gala, confrontations at the office, and the growing pressure of representing one of the country's largest companies, Sarah would have to find a balance between her new responsibility and her life as a single mother. Each day would bring new challenges, new revelations, and perhaps unexpected alliances. What Sarah didn't know was that her journey was about to become much more complicated than she could ever imagine. Secrets from the past, hidden interests, and the true nature of the people around her were about to come to light, testing not only her professional competence, but also her integrity and strength of character. The countdown to the night of the awards had begun, and with it, a series of events that would forever change Sarah's life and everyone around her. The days that followed were a whirlwind for Sarah, between her usual responsibilities at the office and the preparations for the award ceremony. She barely had time to breathe. Every free moment was dedicated to studying etiquette protocols, rehearsing her speech, and familiarizing herself with the most intricate details of the history and achievements of Morgan Enterprises. On a particularly busy afternoon, Sarah was at her desk, surrounded by piles of documents and notes, when she heard a soft knock on the door. She looked up to see Mrs. Wilson, the friendly cleaning lady who had worked for the company for years, entering with a warm smile. "Miss Sarah, I brought you some coffee. Looks like you need it," said Mrs. Wilson, placing a steaming cup on the desk. Sarah smiled gratefully. "Mrs. Wilson, you're an angel. I don't know what I'd do without you." The lady sat in the chair in front of the desk, her wrinkled face marked by the wisdom of years. "So, how are the preparations for the big day going?" Sarah sighed, running her hand through her hair. "I'm doing my best, Mrs. Wilson, but sometimes I feel like I'm swimming against the current." Mrs. Wilson leaned forward, her eyes shining with understanding. "You know, Sarah, when I started working here many years ago, I felt the same way. A simple woman from the countryside among all these important people. But do you know what I learned?" Sarah shook her head, curious. "I learned that what really matters isn't where you come from, but what you do with the opportunities life gives you. Mr. Morgan didn't choose you for no reason. He saw something special in you, something that perhaps even you haven't realized yet." Mrs. Wilson's words touched Sarah deeply. She felt tears forming in the corner of her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. I really needed to hear that." The cleaning lady smiled, getting up. "Now drink that coffee and get back to work. Show all of them what Sarah Mitchell is capable of." With a nod, Mrs. Wilson left, leaving Sarah with a renewed sense of purpose. She returned to her preparations with renewed vigor, determined not to disappoint those who believed in her. However, not everyone in the company shared Mrs. Wilson's optimism. While Sarah was dedicated to preparations, Eleanor was plotting behind the scenes. In a meeting room on the executive floor, she met with a select group of company shareholders. "Gentlemen," Eleanor began, her mellifluous voice masking her true intentions, "I am deeply concerned about the direction Morgan Enterprises is taking. Richard, in his current condition, has made a decision that could seriously compromise the company's reputation. The men exchanged concerned looks as Eleanor continued. He chose a simple assistant to represent the company at the Business Excellence Award ceremony. Imagine the scandal, the embarrassment this could cause. One of the shareholders, Mr. Rodriguez, frowned, but if it was Richard's own decision, Eleanor interrupted him smoothly. Richard is not in a condition to make such important decisions, Mr. Rodriguez. His health is affecting his judgment. It is our duty to protect the company's interests. She made a dramatic pause before continuing. I propose that we take measures to ensure that Morgan Enterprises is properly represented at this crucial event, perhaps by re-evaluating Richard's choice. The shareholders murmured among themselves, some nodding in agreement, others seeming hesitant. Eleanor smiled inwardly, knowing she had planted the seed of doubt. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Richard Morgan was receiving an unexpected visit. Philip entered the room, his face a mask of filial concern. "Dad, how are you feeling today?" he asked, sitting beside the bed. Richard raised an eyebrow, surprised by his son's sudden display of interest. "I'm better, Philip. What brings you here?" Philip hesitated, as if carefully choosing his words. "Dad, I've been thinking about your decision to send Sarah to the ceremony." Richard straightened in bed, his expression hardening. "We've already discussed this, Philip. My decision is made." "No, Dad, but don't you think you're placing too much burden on her shoulders? Sarah is a great assistant, but representing the company at an event of this caliber, that's a lot of responsibility." Richard studied his son for a moment before responding. "It's interesting that you mention responsibility, Philip. Where was your concern for responsibilities when you wasted millions of the company's money on failed projects?" Philip paled, not expecting this response. Richard continued. "Sarah has proven her worth time and time again. She deserves this opportunity, and I trust her to represent everything we've built. End of discussion." Defeated, Philip left the room, his face a mixture of anger and frustration. In the corridor, he picked up his cell phone and dialed quickly. "Mom, Plan A failed. We'll have to resort to more drastic measures." Back at the office, Sarah was about to leave when she noticed an envelope on her desk that wasn't there before. Intrigued, she opened it, only to feel her stomach sink upon reading its contents. It was a veiled threat, insinuating that she should give up representing the company if she didn't want certain secrets to come to light. With trembling hands, Sarah put the letter in her purse. She knew things were about to get much more complicated, but instead of fear, she felt a growing determination. If Eleanor and Philip wanted war, that's exactly what they would get. When she arrived home that night, Sarah found Sophie and Tanya doing a collage on the living room table. The apartment was a mess of colored papers, glue, and glitter, but the smile on her daughter's face was all that mattered at that moment. "Mommy, look what I made," exclaimed Sophie, proudly holding up a poster covered in glitter and cutouts. Sarah approached, curious. "What is it, honey?" "It's a good luck poster for you, Mummy, for your special day at the company." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. In the midst of all the chaos and pressure, her daughter still found ways to support her. She hugged Sophie tightly, feeling her heart fill with love and gratitude. Tanya was watching the scene with a smile, but her eyes revealed concern. She knew her cousin well enough to perceive that something was bothering her. Later, after Sophie went to bed, Tanya confronted Sarah. "What's going on, Sarah? You seem tense." Sarah hesitated for a moment before taking the threatening letter from her purse. Tanya read the contents, her eyes widening in shock and indignation. "This is intimidation. You need to report this, Sarah." Sarah shook her head, tired. "And say what, Tanya? I have no proof of who sent it. Besides, if I do that, I'll look weak, unable to handle the pressure." Tanya held her cousin's hands, her gaze intense. "Listen, Sarah, you're not alone in this. Remember what Mrs. Wilson said? You have something special. Don't let those spoiled rich kids intimidate you." Tanya's words ignited a spark of courage in Sarah. She nodded, determined. "You're right. I won't give up. I'll show all of them what I'm capable of." Meanwhile, in an elegant bar downtown, Eleanor was meeting with a somber-looking man. They spoke in low voices, exchanging furtive glances. "I want you to find out everything about her past," Eleanor instructed. "Every detail, every secret. If there's anything we can use against her, I want to know." The man nodded, a sinister smile forming on his lips. "Consider it done, ma'am. Nobody has a completely clean past." Eleanor smiled, satisfied. The noose was tightening around Sarah, and she could hardly wait to see the assistant crumble under the pressure. What no one knew was that Sarah's past held secrets that could completely change the game. Secrets that, once revealed, would shake the foundations of Morgan Enterprises and force everyone to reassess their alliances and motivations. The countdown to the ceremony continued, and with each passing day, the stakes got higher. Sarah was about to discover that her journey was much more than just about representing a company at an award ceremony. It was about facing her own demons, challenging expectations, and perhaps redefining the meaning of success and integrity in the business world. The battle was just beginning, and Sarah was determined to fight with all her might. Little did she know that the revelations to come would change not only her life, but the fate of everyone around her. The clock marked 2:37 a.m. when Sarah finally decided she couldn't sleep. She got up silently, trying not to wake Sophie, and went to the small balcony of the apartment. New York City, even at that hour, still pulsed with life, twinkling lights dotting the urban horizon. Sarah took a deep breath, letting the cool early morning air calm her nerves. The threatening letter still weighed on her mind, along with all the other pressures she faced. As she observed the city, her thoughts wandered to the past, to the events that had brought her here. 6 years ago, Sarah was a young entrepreneur full of dreams. Her small bakery, Taste of Home, was the pride of her neighborhood. Everything changed when a large corporation arrived, buying properties and forcing small businesses to close. Sarah fought tooth and nail to keep her dream alive, but in the end she was forced to declare bankruptcy. Desperate and pregnant with Sophie, Sarah looked for work everywhere until an opportunity arose at Morgan Enterprises. Ironically, the same company that had indirectly contributed to the failure of her business was now offering a lifeline. A bitter smile crossed Sarah's lips as she remembered her first day as Richard Morgan's assistant. She had sworn to herself that one day she would understand how that corporate world that had destroyed her dreams worked, and perhaps make a difference from the inside out. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of a notification on her cell phone. Intrigued, Sarah picked up the device, surprised to see a message from an unknown number. "Sarah, we need to talk. It's about your past and the future of Morgan Enterprises. Meet me tomorrow at 7 a.m. at the Columbia Cafe. Come alone. CM." Sarah's heart raced. CM? Who could it be? And how did they know about her past? For a moment, fear dominated her, but it was quickly replaced by determination. If someone was trying to intimidate her again, she would face it head-on. The next morning, after leaving Sophie with Tanya, Sarah headed to the Columbia Cafe, a discreet establishment in the city center. Upon entering, her eyes scanned the place until they settled on a familiar figure sitting in a secluded corner. "Caroline Morgan?" Sarah whispered, incredulous. The woman, a few years older than Sarah, smiled gently and gestured for her to sit. Caroline was Richard's eldest daughter, who had distanced herself from the company and the family years ago, for reasons no one really knew. "Hello, Sarah, thank you for coming," Caroline said, her calm voice contrasting with the tension evident in Sarah's shoulders. "Why are we here?" "How do you know about my past?" Sarah asked, getting straight to the point. Caroline sighed, a look of understanding in her eyes. "I know more than you imagine, Sarah. About you, about the company, about the dirty games my stepmother and my brother are playing." She paused, taking a sip of her coffee before continuing. "I never agreed with many of Morgan Enterprises' practices, especially those that harmed small business owners. When I learned what happened to your bakery, let's say I started paying more attention to you." Sarah felt a mixture of surprise and discomfort. "You've been watching me? Why?" Because I saw in you something I hadn't seen in my father's company for a long time: integrity. You could have become bitter, vengeful, but instead you worked hard and earned my father's trust on your own merit. Sarah absorbed Caroline's words, her mind working quickly. But why tell me this now? Caroline leaned forward, her voice lowering. Because the company is in danger, Sarah, not just financially but morally. Eleanor and Philip are planning a hostile takeover, using my father's illness as an excuse to take full control. The shock made Sarah pale. But how can they do that? Mr. Morgan is still in charge. Technically, yes, but they're manipulating the board, spreading rumors about my father's inability to lead. And now, with you representing the company at this award ceremony, they see an opportunity to completely discredit the current leadership. Sarah felt a wave of anger growing within her. So that's why they're trying to intimidate me? To ruin the company's reputation? Caroline nodded gravely. Exactly. But there's more at stake here than just an award or control of the company. It's about my father's legacy and the future of hundreds of employees. She took a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. Here are documents that prove Eleanor and Philip's manipulations, as well as evidence of unethical practices they plan to implement if they take control. Sarah flipped through the documents, her eyes widening with each page. Obscure contracts, plans for mass layoffs, schemes to circumvent environmental regulations. It was a web of corruption and greed. "Why are you showing me this?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Caroline smiled, a gleam of hope in her eyes. "Because I believe you can make a difference, Sarah. My father saw something special in you, and now I see it too. You have the chance to not only save the company, but to transform it into something better." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility fall on her shoulders. "But how? I'm just an assistant facing people with power and influence. You're much more than just an assistant, Sarah. You're someone who knows both sides, the small business owner and the corporate world. You have the vision and integrity to lead Morgan Enterprises in a new direction." Caroline's words resonated deeply with Sarah. She thought of Sophie, of all the company's employees, of the small businesses that could be affected by Morgan Enterprises' decisions. "What do you suggest I do?" Sarah asked, a new determination in her voice. Caroline smiled, satisfied with Sarah's reaction. "First, we need to ensure that you shine at this award ceremony. Show everyone the true value of Morgan Enterprises. Meanwhile, we'll work behind the scenes to expose Eleanor and Philip's plans." The two women spent the next few hours outlining a strategy. When Sarah finally left the cafe, she felt simultaneously exhausted and invigorated. The path ahead would be difficult, but now she had a greater purpose than just representing the company well. Back at the office, Sarah found a tense atmosphere. Employees whispered in the corridors, casting furtive glances in her direction. Upon reaching her office, she found Philip waiting for her, a fake smile on his face. "Sarah, dear, we need to talk about the award ceremony," he said, his mellifluous voice barely disguising the underlying threat. Sarah straightened her shoulders, looking Philip directly in the eyes. "Of course, Philip. I'm eager to discuss how we can ensure the best for Morgan Enterprises." Philip's smile faltered for a moment, clearly not expecting this confident response. "Well, it's exactly about that I want to talk. I was thinking that maybe it would be better if you accompany me on stage," Sarah interrupted, surprising herself with her audacity. "I think that's a great idea. After all, this award is about celebrating teamwork and the shared vision of the company, isn't it?" Philip was momentarily speechless, caught off guard by Sarah's suggestion. She continued, taking advantage of the edge. "Actually, I've been working on a speech that highlights the contributions from all levels of the company, from the board to the frontline employees. I'd really like to hear your ideas on how we can make it even more impactful." Philip's expression oscillated between shock and frustration. Clearly, he hadn't expected Sarah to be so diplomatic. Well, yes, of course. We can discuss this later." As Philip left the office, visibly disconcerted, Sarah allowed herself a small smile of victory. The battle was far from over, but she had won this small skirmish. That night, upon returning home, Sarah found Sophie sleeping on the sofa, surrounded by drawings and cutouts. Tanya emerged from the kitchen, a concerned look on her face. "Sarah, where have you been? I tried calling you all day." Sarah took a deep breath, knowing she couldn't hide the truth from her cousin. "Tanya, sit down. I have a lot to tell you." As Sarah recounted the day's events, the meeting with Caroline, the revelations about Eleanor and Philip, her confrontation at the office, Tanya listened with a mixture of horror and admiration. "My God, Sarah," Tanya whispered when she finished. This is crazy. Are you sure you want to get involved in all this?" Sarah looked at Sophie, sleeping peacefully, and felt a wave of determination. "I don't have a choice, Tanya. It's not just about me or the company. It's about doing the right thing, about creating a better future for Sophie and for everyone who depends on Morgan Enterprises." Tanya squeezed Sarah's hand, her eyes shining with pride and concern. "You know I'm with you no matter what happens, right?" Sarah nodded, grateful for her cousin's unconditional support. "I know, and I'll need you more than ever in the coming weeks." As the two women talked in low voices, making plans and considering all possibilities, the fate of Morgan Enterprises hung by a thread. The battle for the future of the company was just beginning, and Sarah was at the center of it all. Across town, in her luxurious penthouse, Eleanor was receiving a disturbing phone call. "What do you mean she seemed confident? Philip, you had one job, to intimidate her. What happened?" Philip's voice sounded frustrated on the other end of the line. "I don't know, Mom. She seemed different, as if she knew something we don't." Eleanor frowned, a feeling of unease settling in her stomach. "Keep an eye on her, Philip. Something is happening, and we need to find out what it is before it's too late." As the night progressed, the players in this corporate drama prepared for their next moves. The award ceremony, now just 2 weeks away, promised to be much more than a simple ceremony. It would be the stage for a battle that would determine the future not only of Morgan Enterprises, but of all those whose lives were touched by the company. Sarah, lying in her bed but unable to sleep, knew that the coming days would be crucial. She would have to use all her intelligence, courage, and integrity to navigate the turbulent waters that were approaching. With the unexpected help of Caroline, the unwavering support of Tanya, and the constant inspiration of Sophie, she was determined to face whatever came her way. The board was set, the pieces in motion. The battle for the soul of Morgan Enterprises was about to enter its most intense phase, and Sarah was in the eye of the hurricane. The days that followed were a whirlwind for Sarah. Between the preparations for the award ceremony, her daily responsibilities at the office, and secret meetings with Caroline to plan their strategy, she barely had time to breathe. On a particularly busy afternoon, Sarah was in her office, rehearsing her speech for the umpteenth time, when she heard a soft knock on the door. Looking up, she saw Mrs. Wilson entering with a steaming cup of coffee. "Thought you might need this, dear," said the cleaning lady with a warm smile. Sarah smiled back, grateful for the kindness. "Mrs. Wilson, you're an angel. I don't know what I'd do without you." Mrs. Wilson placed the cup on the desk and sat down, her wise eyes studying Sarah attentively. "You look tired, my child. Is everything all right?" For a moment, Sarah considered confiding, telling everything that was happening. But she knew that the fewer people who knew, the safer it would be for everyone, so she opted for a middle ground. "I'm nervous about the award ceremony, Mrs. Wilson. It's a lot of responsibility." The lady nodded understandingly. "I understand. But you know, Sarah, sometimes we worry so much about not disappointing others that we forget to trust ourselves." Sarah frowned, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "Well, do you think Mr. Morgan chose you for no reason? He saw something in you. Dear, something special. And it's not just him. I see it too, every day." Mrs. Wilson's words touched Sarah deeply. She felt tears forming in the corner of her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. I really needed to hear that." The cleaning lady stood up, giving an affectionate pat on Sarah's shoulder. "Now drink that coffee and get back to work. Show all of them what Sarah Mitchell is capable of." After Mrs. Wilson left, Sarah reflected on her words. It was easy to feel small and inadequate in the face of the challenges she was facing, but perhaps it was time to start believing more in herself. With renewed determination, she returned to her speech. This time, however, instead of just reciting rehearsed words, she began to infuse the text with her own experiences and vision. She spoke about the importance of valuing each employee, of how a company's true success comes from teamwork and mutual respect. As she worked, she didn't notice Philip standing at the door, observing her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. The next day, Sarah was surprised by an unexpected invitation. Eleanor, Richard's ex-wife, wanted to meet her for lunch. The invitation was apparently to discuss the final details of the ceremony, but Sarah knew there was more behind it. The restaurant chosen by Eleanor was one of the most exclusive in the city. Sarah felt out of place upon entering, aware that her simple dress contrasted with the luxurious environment. Eleanor was already there, impeccably dressed and made up, a cold smile on her lips. "Sarah, dear, I'm so glad you could come," said Eleanor, indicating the chair across from her. Sarah sat down, maintaining an upright posture and a firm gaze. "Thank you for the invitation, Mrs. Eleanor. I must admit, I was surprised." Eleanor laughed softly, a sound without joy. "Oh, don't be so formal. After all, we're practically in the same position now, aren't we? Both representing the interests of Morgan Enterprises." The waiter approached to take their orders. Eleanor chose sophisticated dishes with French names, while Sarah opted for something simple that she recognized on the menu. As soon as the waiter moved away, Eleanor got straight to the point. "Sarah, I'm going to be frank with you. I'm concerned about this award ceremony." Sarah maintained a neutral expression. "Concerned? How so?" "Well, dear, you have to understand that this event is crucial for the company's image. We have investors, business partners, the press, they'll all be there watching every move." Eleanor paused, taking a sip of her wine before continuing. "Don't misunderstand me. I'm sure you're very competent in your daily work, but this is a completely different world, a world for which, frankly, you haven't been prepared." Sarah felt the blood boil in her veins, but she kept calm. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Eleanor, but I can assure you that I am preparing extensively for this event. Mr. Morgan trusts me, and I don't intend to disappoint him." Eleanor's smile became even colder. "Ah yes, Richard and his impulsive decisions. You know, Sarah, sometimes the best way not to disappoint someone is to recognize our own limitations." It was then that Sarah understood the true purpose of this lunch. It wasn't just to intimidate her, but to offer an exit, a chance, to gracefully give up. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mrs. Eleanor?" Sarah asked, her voice calm but firm. Eleanor leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I'm offering an alternative, dear, one that would be beneficial for everyone. You could announce that, after careful consideration, you decided it would be better for the company if someone with more experience in events of this caliber represented it. Philip would be more than willing to take on this role." Sarah felt a wave of indignation course through her body, but instead of showing her anger, she smiled, surprising Eleanor. "Mrs. Eleanor, I appreciate your concern, but as I said before, Mr. Morgan entrusted me with this responsibility, and I intend to honor it. As for my lack of experience, well, we all have to start somewhere, don't we?" Eleanor's face contracted for a moment, her mask of cordiality slipping. "You don't understand what you're dealing with, girl. This is not a game for amateurs." "Perhaps not," Sarah replied, her voice firm, "but it's also not a game where the rules are dictated only by those at the top. Morgan Enterprises is made up of people at all levels, and that's what I intend to represent at the ceremony." The two women stared at each other for a long moment, the tension palpable between them. Finally, Eleanor leaned back in her chair, a forced smile on her lips. "Well, it seems you've already made your decision. I just hope you don't regret it." The rest of the lunch passed in a tense silence, punctuated only by superficial comments about the weather and the food. When they finally said goodbye, Sarah felt as if she had just left a battlefield. Back at the office, she found a message from Caroline requesting an urgent meeting. They met at a discreet cafe on the outskirts of the city. "What happened?" Caroline asked as soon as Sarah sat down. Sarah reported the lunch with Eleanor, not omitting any detail. Caroline listened attentively, her face becoming increasingly serious. "This is worse than I thought," said Caroline when Sarah finished. "They're getting desperate, which means they might try something more drastic soon." "What can we do?" asked Sarah, feeling the weight of the situation. Caroline sighed, running her hand through her hair. "We need to accelerate our plans. I have some information that might be useful, but we need to be extremely careful about how we use it." She handed Sarah a flash drive. "Here are documents that prove some of Eleanor and Philip's questionable practices. But be careful. If we use this the wrong way, we could end up harming the company as a whole." Sarah looked at the small device in her hand, feeling its metaphorical weight. "How will we know the right time to use this?" "We'll have to trust our instincts," Caroline replied, "and your ability to read the situation during the ceremony." The two women spent the following hour refining their strategy, considering all possible scenarios and how to react to them. When they parted, Sarah felt simultaneously exhausted and determined. Upon arriving home that night, she found Sophie and Tanya working on a science project at the kitchen table. The apartment was a mess of papers, glue, and what appeared to be a miniature volcano, but the smile on her daughter's face was all Sarah needed to see at that moment. "Mommy, look what we made!" exclaimed Sophie, proudly pointing to the volcano. Sarah smiled, feeling the stress of the day melt a little. "Wow, that's amazing, honey. Will it erupt and everything?" Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Aunt Tanya said we can test it tomorrow in the yard." Tanya cast a concerned look at Sarah, clearly perceiving that something was bothering her. Later, after Sophie went to bed, the two cousins sat on the balcony with a cup of tea. "What's going on, Sarah?" Tanya asked softly. Sarah hesitated for a moment before confiding, telling about the lunch with Eleanor and the new developments with Caroline. Tanya listened to everything in silence, her face a mixture of concern and admiration. "My God, Sarah," she said when Sarah finished. This is crazy. Are you sure you want to continue with this? It seems so dangerous." Sarah looked at the illuminated city in front of her, thoughtful. "I don't have a choice, Tanya. It's not just about me or the company. It's about doing the right thing, about creating a better future for Sophie and for everyone who depends on Morgan Enterprises." Tanya squeezed Sarah's hand, her eyes shining with determination. "Then we'll do this together. You're not alone in this battle, cousin." The two women stayed there, observing the city, each lost in her own thoughts. The award ceremony was just a week away, and Sarah knew it would be the decisive moment. Everything she had worked for, everything she hoped to achieve, would be put to the test that night. Meanwhile, in a luxurious penthouse on the other side of the city, Eleanor and Philip were plotting their next steps. "She's not going to give up, Mom," said Philip, frustration evident in his voice. "What do we do now?" Eleanor smiled, a dangerous gleam in her eyes. "Don't worry, dear. If she wants to play, let's play. But on our board, by our rules." She picked up her phone, dialing a number. "Hello? Yes, it's me. I need you to do that job we discussed. Yes, immediately. The ceremony is in a week and we need to be prepared for all possibilities." As she hung up the phone, Eleanor smiled at her son. "Get ready, Philip. The show is about to begin, and I guarantee it will be a night no one will soon forget." The tension in the city was palpable. In offices, homes, and cafes, the pieces were moving on the invisible board that would determine the future of Morgan Enterprises. And at the center of it all was Sarah, an ordinary woman facing forces much bigger than herself, armed only with her integrity, determination, and the truth. The countdown to the ceremony continued, and with each passing day the stakes got higher. The stage was set for a confrontation that promised to shake the structures not only of a company, but of an entire way of doing business. The week leading up to the award ceremony passed like a blur for Sarah. Every free minute was dedicated to preparations, rehearsals, and strategic meetings with Caroline. The offices of Morgan Enterprises buzzed with a palpable mixture of excitement and tension. On the eve of the big day, Sarah was in her office, reviewing her speech one last time, when she heard a soft knock on the door. Looking up, she saw Richard Morgan entering, leaning on a cane. "Mr. Morgan," she exclaimed, getting up quickly. Shouldn't you be in the hospital? Richard smiled, his tired eyes still shining with determination. I couldn't stay there knowing everything that's happening here, Sarah. Besides, the doctors gave me a temporary discharge for tomorrow's ceremony. Sarah helped him sit down, noticing how he seemed more fragile than ever. However, his voice still carried the authority of always. How are the preparations going? He asked. Everything's on track, Mr. Morgan, Sarah replied. The speech is ready. I've rehearsed with the public relations team and... Richard raised his hand, gently interrupting her. That's not what I asked, Sarah. How are you? The question caught Sarah by surprise. For a moment, she considered giving the standard response, saying she was fine and ready, but something in Richard's look made her hesitate. To be honest, Mr. Morgan, I'm nervous, she admitted. It's a big responsibility, and I feel there's a lot at stake. Richard nodded, understanding. And you're right, there is a lot at stake, more than you imagine. He paused as if carefully choosing his next words. Sarah, I need you to understand something. The decision to put you in this position wasn't just about the award ceremony. It was about the future of Morgan Enterprises. Sarah frowned, confused. What do you mean, Mr. Morgan? Richard sighed, a look of regret crossing his face. I made many mistakes over the years, Sarah. I built this company from the ground up, but in the process, well, let's say I didn't always make the most ethical choices. He looked out the window, his voice lowering. When you joined the company, I saw something in you that I hadn't seen in business for a long time. Integrity. And that's when I realized I needed to change things. Sarah listened attentively, feeling she was about to hear something crucial. Morgan Enterprises needs a new direction, Sarah. A direction that balances financial success with social responsibility and ethical business practices. And I believe you can be the person to lead that change. The shock made Sarah pale. Me? But Mr. Morgan, I'm just an intelligent, dedicated woman with a clear vision of what's right, interrupted Richard. Don't underestimate yourself, Sarah. You have potential for much more than you imagine. He took a folder from his jacket and handed it to Sarah. Inside are documents detailing my plan for the company's restructuring, including a proposal for you to assume a leadership position on the new board of directors. Sarah opened the folder with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the documents in shock. It was a bold proposal, one that would not only elevate her position in the company, but also implement significant changes in how Morgan Enterprises operated. This is amazing, Mr. Morgan, but why tell me this now? Why not wait until after the ceremony? Richard leaned forward, his voice lowering. Because I fear we don't have much time, Sarah. Eleanor and Philip are plotting something, I can feel it. Tomorrow's ceremony. Will be crucial, not just for the company's image, but for its future. He held Sarah's hand, his gaze intense. I need you to be prepared for anything. Use your speech, not just to celebrate our past achievements, but to lay the groundwork for our future. Show everyone why I chose you for this role. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility more than ever. I won't disappoint you, Mr. Morgan. Richard smiled, a gleam of pride in his eyes. I know you won't, Sarah. I trust you more than anyone else in this company, including my own family. When Richard left, Sarah sat for a long time, absorbing everything she had heard. The trust Richard placed in her was both inspiring and frightening. That night in her small apartment, Sarah rewrote parts of her speech, infusing it with the new vision Richard had shared. Sophie, noticing her mother's agitation, approached with a drawing. Look, Mommy, I made this for you to take tomorrow, she said, handing over the paper. Sarah looked at the colorful drawing, feeling tears form in her eyes. It was a simple representation of herself, standing on a stage with the words, "My mom, my hero," written in childish letters. It's beautiful, honey, said Sarah, hugging her daughter tightly. I'll take it with me and look at it whenever I need courage. Later, after Sophie went to sleep, Sarah and Tanya sat on the balcony, sharing a bottle of wine. So tomorrow's the big day, said Tanya, studying her cousin's face. How are you really feeling? Sarah sighed, looking at the illuminated city. Honestly, I'm terrified, Tanya. There's so much at stake, so many people counting on me. What if I fail? Tanya placed her hand over Sarah's. Hey, look at me. You're not going to fail. You know why? Because you're Sarah Mitchell, the woman who raised a daughter on her own, who rebuilt her life after losing everything, who earned the respect of one of the country's biggest businessmen. You're stronger and more capable than you think. Tanya's words ignited a spark of confidence in Sarah. She smiled, grateful for her cousin's unconditional support. Thank you, Tanya. I don't know what I'd do without you. Probably stay home watching reruns of old soap operas, joked Tanya, making them both laugh. Across town, in her luxurious penthouse, Eleanor was finalizing her own preparations for the ceremony. Philip entered the room looking nervous. Is everything ready, Mum? He asked. Eleanor smiled, a dangerous gleam in her eyes. All prepared, my dear. Tomorrow, Sarah Mitchell will learn that you don't mess with the Morgan family. She picked up her phone, dialing a number. Is everything ready for tomorrow? Great. Remember, we want to make an impact, but nothing that can be traced back to us. Understood? Perfect. Hanging up the phone, Eleanor turned to her son. Sleep well, Philip. Tomorrow will be a day no one at Morgan Enterprises will soon forget. Night advanced, and in different parts of the city, the players in this corporate drama prepared for the imminent confrontation. Sarah, in her modest apartment, rehearsed her speech one last time before sleeping. Caroline, in her private office, reviewed the documents that could expose Eleanor and Philip's questionable practices, and in his mansion, Richard Morgan looked out the window, praying that his bet on Sarah was the right decision. The award ceremony promised to be much more than a simple celebration of business achievements. It would be the stage for a battle for the future of Morgan Enterprises. A battle that would test not only Sarah's professional competence, but her integrity, courage, and vision for the future. As the city slept, the stage was being set for one of the most dramatic confrontations in recent corporate history. And at the center of it all was Sarah, an ordinary woman about to face forces that could crush people much more powerful than her. The dawn would bring with it not just a new day, but potentially a new era for Morgan Enterprises. And Sarah was determined to face whatever came, armed with her integrity, Richard's trust, and the love of her family. The countdown was coming to an end. In a few hours, the fate of many would be decided on the stage of a gala ceremony, and Sarah Mitchell was ready to make history. The day of the award ceremony finally arrived. Sarah woke up before sunrise, her heart racing with a mixture of anxiety and determination. She dressed carefully, putting on the navy blue dress she had chosen with Tanya's help, elegant but not ostentatious. Before leaving, Sarah stopped in Sophie's room, who was still sleeping soundly. She softly kissed her daughter's forehead, whispering, "Mommy's going to make you proud today, my love." The event hall of the luxurious hotel where the ceremony would be held was already a whirlwind of activity when Sarah arrived. Sadakiration. Teams were putting the finishing touches. Waiters were rehearsing their routes, and the first VIP, guests were beginning to arrive. Sarah was led to a reserved room for the main representatives of Morgan Enterprises. Inside, she found Richard Morgan, who looked pale but determined. "Sarah," he greeted her with a tired smile. "Are you ready?" She nodded, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "Yes, sir. I made some changes to the speech based on our conversation yesterday. I hope you approve." Richard was about to respond when the door opened again. Eleanor and Philip entered, both impeccably dressed and with smiles that didn't reach there. "Sharson, how good that you're all here," said Eleanor, her voice too sweet to be sincere. "Sarah, dear, you look absolutely charming tonight." Sarah forced a smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Eleanor. You both look very elegant as well." Philip approached, extending a glass of champagne to Sarah. "A toast to the success of Morgan Enterprises?" For a moment, Sarah hesitated. Something in Philip's look made her uncomfortable. But, not wanting to create tension so early, she accepted the glass. "To the company's success," she said, touching her glass to the others. As she drank, Sarah didn't notice the triumphant look that Eleanor and Philip exchanged. The ceremony began promptly at 8 p.m. The hall was packed with the cream of the American business world. Journalists, photographers, and cameramen positioned themselves strategically, ready to capture every moment. The Master of Ceremonies took the stage, starting the event with a speech about the importance of innovation and ethics in business. Sarah, seated in the front row next to Richard, felt her heart beating faster and faster as the moment for her speech approached. Finally, the time came. And now, representing Morgan Enterprises, winner of this year's Business Excellence Award, please welcome Ms. Sarah Mitchell. A polite applause filled the hall as Sarah got up and walked toward the stage. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, some curious, others skeptical, and some openly hostile. Upon reaching the microphone, Sarah took a deep breath, seeking courage. She looked at the audience and began. "Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here representing Morgan Enterprises." Suddenly, Sarah felt a wave of dizziness. The stage lights seemed to get brighter, and the words in her notes began to blur. She blinked several times, trying to focus. Morgan Enterprises has a long history of... Sarah stopped, feeling cold sweat running down her back. Something was wrong, very wrong. She looked at the audience, seeing expressions of confusion and concern forming on faces. In the front row, Eleanor was smiling discreetly, while Philip feigned an expression of concern. Richard, on the other hand, looked genuinely alarmed. With a supreme effort, Sarah tried to continue. "We believe in... But the words wouldn't come. The world began to spin, and Sarah felt her legs weaken. Before she could contain herself, she stumbled and fell to her knees on the stage. A murmur of shock ran through the audience. Photographers frantically fired, their cameras capturing the moment when the representative of Morgan Enterprises apparently succumbed to pressure. Richard immediately stood up, rushing to the stage to help Sarah. Caroline, who was sitting a few rows back, also hurried toward the stage, her expression a mixture of concern and suspicion. As confusion set in, Eleanor leaned toward Philip, whispering, "Perfect. Now we just wait for chaos to settle in." But what Eleanor and Philip didn't know was that their plans were about to take an unexpected turn. For among the shocked crowd, an unlikely figure was about to enter the scene, changing the course of events in a way no one could predict. The night that should have been the triumph of Morgan Enterprises had turned into a public nightmare. And, as Sarah struggled to maintain consciousness, the true battles, both corporate and personal, were just beginning. The fate of the company and everyone involved hung by a thread. And in the next moments, secrets would be revealed, alliances would be tested, and the true character of each person would be exposed for all to see. The countdown to the climax of this corporate saga had begun, and no one would emerge unscathed from the storm that was about to unleash. Chaos settled in the event hall. Sarah, still staggering on stage, fought to maintain consciousness, while Richard and Caroline rushed to help her. The camera flashes didn't stop, capturing every moment of the disaster unfolding. It was then that an unexpected voice cut through the buzz of the crowd. "Stop!" All eyes turned to the source of the shout. There, standing in the middle of the aisle, was Mrs. Wilson, the cleaning lady from Morgan Enterprises. Her normally gentle face was contorted with anger and determination. "I saw everything," she shouted, pointing an accusing finger at Eleanor and Philip. "I saw when they put something in her. Drink." A stunned silence fell over the audience. Eleanor stood up, her face a mask of forced indignation. "This is absurd. How dare you make such an accusation?" But Mrs. Wilson was not intimidated. She walked firmly toward the stage, her voice gaining strength. "I was cleaning near the VIP room. I saw when Mr. Philip offered a glass to Ms. Sarah, and I saw when Mrs. Eleanor put something in it when she thought no one was looking." The revelation fell like a bomb in the hall. Journalists began firing questions. Photographers redirected their cameras to Eleanor and Philip, who now looked pale and cornered. Caroline, who was helping Sarah to sit, seized the moment. She took the microphone and addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we are witnessing here tonight goes far beyond simple sabotage. It's the culmination of years of unethical practices and manipulations within Morgan Enterprises." She gestured to someone in the audience, and a man stood up, carrying a folder. "This is Dr. Andrew Campos, independent auditor. He has documentary..." evidence of corruption schemes, tax evasion, and predatory practices led by Eleanor and Philip Morgan. Dr. Campos took the stage, opening the folder and beginning to detail a series of suspicious transactions and fraudulent contracts. Meanwhile, paramedics had arrived and were attending to Sarah. Richard, still by her side, seemed torn between concern for her health and shock at the revelations being made. Philip, seeing that the situation was getting out of control, tried one last, desperate move. He stood up, shouting, "This is all a conspiracy. Sarah and Caroline are trying to take control of the company." But his attempt to divert attention was interrupted by a weak but determined voice coming from the stage. It was Sarah who, with the help of the paramedics, had stood up and taken the microphone. "No, Philip," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "The only conspiracy here was yours, trying to sabotage not just me, but the future of Morgan Enterprises." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I came here today not just to receive an award, but to announce a new era for our company. An era of transparency, ethics, and social responsibility." Sarah then revealed the restructuring plan that Richard had shared with her, detailing how the company planned to correct past mistakes and establish new business practices. The audience was hypnotized. Journalists furiously took notes, executives whispered among themselves, and at the center of it all, Sarah continued, her voice now firm and full of conviction. "Morgan Enterprises has a choice to make. We can continue on the path of greed and corruption, or we can choose to be better, do better, build a legacy we can truly be proud of." She turned to Richard, who now had tears in his eyes. "Mr. Morgan, you gave me an opportunity when I needed it most. Now I'm asking you to give that same opportunity to the company you built. Let's do the right thing." Richard slowly stood up, walking to the microphone. He looked at the audience, at Eleanor and Philip, and finally at Sarah. Then, with a voice laden with emotion, he said, "Sarah is right. It's time for changes. As of today, I announce my retirement from the presidency of Morgan Enterprises. And I recommend to the board that Sarah Mitchell be appointed as my successor." The declaration was received with a mixture of applause and exclamations of surprise. Eleanor, seeing her plans crumbling, tried one last card. "This is madness. She's just an assistant. She doesn't have the experience to lead a company of this size." But her voice was drowned out by another, coming from the back of the hall. It was a middle-aged man who identified himself as the owner of a small bakery. "I've known Sarah Mitchell for years. She owned a bakery in my neighborhood, before predatory practices from large corporations forced her to close. If there's anyone who understands both the side of the small business owner and the corporate world, it's her." Others in the audience began to speak up, sharing stories of how the policies of Morgan Enterprises' old management had negatively affected their lives and businesses. The atmosphere in the hall had completely changed. What had begun as a night of corporate celebration had transformed into a moment of reckoning and potentially redemption. Sarah, still on stage, looked at the audience, at Richard, at Caroline and Mrs. Wilson. She knew the path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time she felt hope. Hope that she could really make a difference, not just for herself and her daughter, but for everyone whose lives were touched by Morgan Enterprises. Meanwhile, at the back of the hall, police discreetly approached Eleanor and Philip. The night was far from over, and the consequences of everyone's actions were just beginning to unfold. The battle for the future of Morgan Enterprises had reached a crucial turning point, and at the center of it all was Sarah Mitchell, a woman who had begun the night fighting for her dignity and now found herself on the verge of leading one of the greatest corporate transformations in recent country history. Fate had cast the dice, and now it was up to Sarah and her allies to shape the future that opened before them. A future that promised challenges, but also the possibility of redemption and real change. The weeks that followed the tumultuous award ceremony were a whirlwind of activities for Sarah and all of Morgan Enterprises. The media talked of nothing else. The sabotage attempt, the corruption accusations, the bold restructuring proposal, and of course the unlikely rise of a former assistant to the leadership of one of the country's largest companies. Sarah barely had time to process everything that had happened. Between endless meetings with the board of directors, press interviews, and strategic planning sessions, she often found herself longing for the simpler days when her biggest concern was helping Sophie with homework. On a particularly busy afternoon, Sarah was in her new office, still strangely large and imposing for her taste, when she heard a familiar knock on the door. "Come in, Mrs. Wilson," she said, smiling as she saw the cleaning lady enter with a cup of coffee. "Thought you might need this, boss lady," said Mrs. Wilson with a warm smile. Sarah laughed. "Please don't call me that. You know that if it weren't for you, I probably wouldn't be here now." Mrs. Wilson placed the cup on the desk and sat down, her face becoming serious. "And how are you handling all this, my child?" Sarah sighed, running her hand through her hair. "Honestly, sometimes I feel completely lost, Mrs. Wilson. There's so much responsibility, so many decisions to make, and there are moments when I wonder if I really deserve to be here." The elderly lady extended her hand, holding Sarah's firmly. "Listen carefully, dear. You are exactly where you should be. You know why? Because you have something that many people in this corporate world lost a long time ago. A heart." Mrs. Wilson's words touched Sarah deeply. She felt tears forming in the corner of her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. I really needed to hear that." At that moment, the door opened again and Caroline entered, carrying a stack of documents. "Sarah, we have the latest updates on the Eleanor and Philip case." "Oh, hello, Mrs. Wilson." Mrs. Wilson stood up, giving an affectionate pat on Sarah's shoulder. "Well, I'll let you two work. Remember, Sarah, one step at a time." After Mrs. Wilson left, Caroline sat down, spreading the documents on the desk. "So the news isn't exactly good. Eleanor and Philip are fighting tooth and nail. They've hired a high-profile legal team and are trying to discredit all the evidence we have against them." Sarah frowned, studying the papers. "Do they still have supporters on the board?" Caroline nodded, concerned. "Some, mainly those who benefited from the old practices. They're afraid that a complete audit will expose their own schemes. And Richard, how is he handling all this?" Caroline's expression softened a bit. "He's trying. It's hard for him to accept that he was deceived for so long. But he's firmly on your side, Sarah. He believes you're the company's best chance to really change." Sarah leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of it all. "Sometimes I wonder if we're not being naive, Caroline. Is it really possible to change a company of this size? Do things differently?" Caroline smiled, a determined gleam in her eyes. "If anyone can do it, it's you, Sarah. Remember why we're doing this. It's not just about profits or reputation. It's about all the lives we can positively impact." The two women spent the following hours outlining strategies, reviewing documents, and preparing for the challenges to come. When Caroline finally left, it was already night. Sarah looked at the clock and sighed. She had promised Sophie she would arrive in time to read a story before bed. Quickly, she gathered her things and left the office. On the way home, Sarah passed a small cafe. Through the window, she saw a family sitting, laughing and talking animatedly. The scene made her stop. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a future where Morgan Enterprises wasn't seen as a corporate predator, but as a force for good, helping small businesses like that one to thrive. Arriving home, Sarah found Sophie still awake, anxiously waiting for her. "Mommy, you made it in time," exclaimed the girl, running to hug her. Sarah hugged her daughter tightly, feeling all the worries of the day dissipate. "A promise is a promise, my love. What story shall we read today?" As she read to Sophie, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. Everything she was doing, all the battles she was facing, was to create a better world for her daughter and for all other children. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the office with a new determination. She gathered her team and announced, "Folks, I know the last few weeks have been a roller coaster, but today I want us to start implementing some real changes. Let's create a support program for small businesses affected by our past practices. And I want a complete review of all our contracts and partnerships to ensure they're aligned with our new ethical values." The team, initially surprised, soon filled with enthusiasm. Ideas began to flow, and for the first time since she took the leadership, Sarah felt they were really making progress. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Eleanor and Philip were meeting with their lawyers. The atmosphere was tense. "We can't let that nobody destroy everything we've built," exclaimed Eleanor, pounding on the table. Philip, looking more tired than ever, replied, "Mom, maybe we should consider a settlement. The evidence against us is solid and—" "Settlement?" Eleanor interrupted him, furious. "Never. We'll fight to the end. Morgan Enterprises is ours, and no one is going to take it from us." But while Eleanor plotted her revenge, she didn't realize that the world around her was changing. Employees of Morgan Enterprises, inspired by Sarah's new leadership, were beginning to speak out, sharing stories of unethical practices they had witnessed over the years. The battle for the future of Morgan Enterprises was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, there was a sense of hope in the air, a hope that perhaps the corporate world could be a better, more ethical, and more humane place. And at the center of it all was Sarah Mitchell, a woman who had started as a simple assistant and now found herself leading a corporate revolution. A woman determined to prove that success and integrity were not mutually exclusive. The sun was setting over New York, casting a golden glow over the skyscrapers. In her office, Sarah looked out the window, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the excitement of the possibilities that opened before her. The real work was just beginning, and the final chapter of this saga was yet to be written. But one thing was certain: Morgan Enterprises would never be the same, and Sarah Mitchell was ready to lead the way to a better future. A year had passed since the tumultuous night of the award ceremony. The sun was rising over New York, its golden rays reflecting in the windows of the Morgan Enterprises headquarters building. On the 30th floor, Sarah Mitchell observed the city awakening, a cup of coffee in her hands and a serene smile on her lips. The past year had been a roller coaster of challenges and triumphs. Implementing changes at Morgan Enterprises hadn't been easy, but the results were beginning to show. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Caroline, carrying a stack of newspapers and magazines. "Good morning, Sarah. I think you'll want to see this," she said, spreading the publications on the desk. Sarah picked up the first magazine, her eyes widening at seeing the cover. It was a photo of her, with the headline, "The Business Revolutionary: How Sarah Mitchell is Changing the Corporate Game." "Wow," murmured Sarah, flipping through the pages. There were articles detailing the changes implemented at Morgan Enterprises, the small business support program, the new ethical policies, the sustainability projects. Caroline smiled, picking up another newspaper. "And that's not all. Look at this." It was news about Eleanor and Philip Morgan. After months of legal battles, they had finally reached a settlement. Eleanor was banned from holding executive positions in publicly traded companies for 10 years, while Philip had opted for a plea bargain, agreeing to testify about the corruption schemes in exchange for a reduced sentence. Sarah sighed, feeling a mixture of relief and regret. "I never wanted to destroy them, you know. I just wanted things to be done the right way." "And that's exactly what you're doing," replied Caroline, squeezing Sarah's shoulder in a gesture of support. At that moment, Mrs. Wilson entered the room, carrying more coffee. Her eyes sparkled upon seeing the headlines. "Didn't I tell you?" "I knew you'd make a difference, dear." Sarah laughed, hugging the lady. "And I owe much of that to you, Mrs. Wilson. If it weren't for your courage that night—" "Oh, nothing," Mrs. Wilson interrupted, blushing. "I just did what was right. And speaking of which, there's someone here who wants to see you." She gestured to the door where Richard Morgan was standing, leaning on his cane. His face, previously marked by illness and worry, now seemed lighter, almost rejuvenated. "Sarah," he said, entering the room, "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Never, Mr. Morgan," replied Sarah, offering him a chair. "How are you feeling?" Richard smiled, looking around the room that had once been his. "Better than in years, actually, and much of that is thanks to you, Sarah." He picked up one of the magazines, observing the photo on the cover. "You know, When I chose you as my successor, many thought I was crazy. Even I had doubts sometimes. But look at this." He made an encompassing gesture. "You not only saved the company, you transformed it into something better than I ever managed." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. "Mr. Morgan, No, let me finish," he gently interrupted her. "You showed me that it's possible to do business with ethics, that we can be successful without stepping on others, and most importantly, you gave me the chance to correct my mistakes, to leave a legacy I can be proud of." The room went silent. For a moment, everyone absorbing the weight of those words. It was Mrs. Wilson who finally broke the silence. "Well, I think this deserves a celebration. How about breakfast for everyone at Sarah's bakery?" Everyone laughed, the tension dissipating. "Great idea, Mrs. Wilson," agreed Sarah. "Actually, there's something I'd like to announce to all of you." Intrigued, they followed Sarah out of the building. A few blocks away, they stopped in front of a newly renovated, charming bakery. The sign in front said, "New Beginnings Bakery." "Welcome to Morgan Enterprises' newest project," announced Sarah, opening the door. "This bakery will be run as a cooperative, offering work and training opportunities for people who lost their businesses due to predatory corporate practices in the past." Inside the bakery, several people were working animatedly, preparing breads and pastries. Among them, Sarah recognized faces of former small business owners who had been affected by Morgan's old policies. "Sarah, this is amazing," said Caroline. Moved. Richard nodded, visibly touched. "It's more than amazing, it's the true spirit of what Morgan Enterprises should be." As everyone explored the bakery, tasting the delicious treats and chatting with the employees, Sarah found herself thinking about her journey, from owning a small bakery to being an assistant and now CEO of one of the country's largest companies. It had been an incredible journey, full of challenges but also of growth and discoveries. Sophie, who had arrived with Tanya, ran to hug her mother. "Mommy, this is incredible. Can I work here during the holidays?" Sarah laughed, hugging her daughter. "Of course you can, my love. This place is as much about the future as it is about correcting the past." Later that day, back in her office, Sarah received an unexpected call. It was the mayor of the city, inviting her to lead a task force on business ethics and sustainable development. As she considered the invitation, Sarah looked out the window, observing the city she loved so much. She thought of all the lives she could positively impact, of all the changes that could still be made. With a smile, she accepted the invitation. The journey was far from over. In fact, a new chapter was just beginning. That night, at home, Sarah sat with Sophie to read a story before bed. The girl chose a book about a heroine who'd changed the world. "Mommy," said Sophie sleepily, "when I grow up, I want to be like you. Someone who makes a difference." Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, feeling her heart fill with love and hope. "You already make a difference, my love. We all can, with small acts of kindness and courage every day." As Sophie fell asleep, Sarah reflected on everything that had happened. Morgan Enterprises had transformed from a symbol of corporate greed into a beacon of ethics and social responsibility. And although there was still much work to be done, she knew they were on the right path. The future was bright and full of possibilities, and Sarah Mitchell was ready to face it, one day at a time, with integrity, compassion, and the unwavering determination to make a difference. As night fell over New York, the city lights shone like stars, reminding everyone that even in darkness, there is always hope. And sometimes all it takes to change the world is one person brave enough to take the first step. Dear listeners, we hope that Sarah Mitchell's journey has touched your hearts and inspired you. To continue exploring equally captivating stories about courage, ethics, and transformation, we've prepared a special playlist. You can find it by clicking the link on the left. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day we bring unique narratives that explore the complexity of life and the business world. Don't miss our upcoming content. We're eager to read your comments and know how this story impacted you. Until next time.